Okay, so today we'll be talking about Lincoln and our assigned readings from Maxwell and Shankman. Now, the first law I want to talk about is the law of the big Mo, which is momentum. And momentum is the most powerful agent of change. And be able to make change and get the job done, you need passion, tools, people, and momentum. And I believe Lincoln is the perfect example of momentum. For example, like the obstacles he had to go through, they seemed small to him, I feel like. Even though they were, big issues that needed to be, accomplished, he definitely didn't really make them seem like the world was going to end. He used small stories and sense of humor to like get people through it. And I think that shows a great deal of momentum that he had because the obstacles seemed so small. And he also definitely, was great at steering momentum. Like I said, through stories and talks with his board. He definitely used his trait of sense of humor to be able to motivate others. And that's also a great, example of momentum again. And another thing that Maxwell said momentum needed is that it always starts with little progress and then explodes. And I feel like the momentum, proof of that for Lincoln was the Emancipation Proclamation. And then all of a sudden the 13th Amendment, which completely changed everything. It was the start of the slaves, beginning to be free, but then the 13th Amendment really solidified that. The next law is the law of priorities. And one of the sentences I liked from the text was that leaders never advance to a point where they aren't prioritizing. And prioritizing allows a leader to always think ahead. And I definitely think Lincoln and others in the movie use this law to show their leadership. For example, Lincoln chose, getting forth the 13th Amendment instead of talks of peace. He knew the technicalities of it, and he knew that the 13th Amendment would be better than just talks of peace because he knew more would come from the 13th Amendment being passed. And then another prioritizing I saw from him, it was his son's safety versus his son's ambition to serve in the military. Through the entire movie, as soon as his son arrives, you see like the struggle between the two. And then once his son finally, tells him why he wants to serve, like he'll feel right. Then Lincoln finally realized, okay, he was prioritizing his son's safety over his son's ambition to serve. And then in the end, you see that his son did join the military. So I think that was a big point for his son. And I'm glad, Lincoln finally recognized it. And also the representatives, I feel like also prioritized in the end when they were voting yes for the 13th Amendment. And they kept saying that they were being threatened to be killed if they didn't vote no. So I think they actually prioritized, freedom and what was right over their own life. If those threats of them being killed were really real, then definitely the representatives, did the law of priority. And I kind of think law of priorities and law of sacrifice just kind of go into each other. But I'll talk about the law of sacrifice next. And then also Stevens definitely implemented the law of priority when he chose the wording of the 13th Amendment versus going against his own values. It seemed like the entire, time he was a representative, he always worded the 13th Amendment how he thought it should be. And then when the other side, asked him what exactly it meant, because obviously if he worded a certain way, then there'd be less people to vote yes for it. He worded it in a way that it would pass. So I think that was definitely a big point for him, and even a sacrifice for him, even because, he was going against his own values to word it so that it would pass. All right, the law of sacrifice, you must give up to go up. And I definitely agree that sacrifice is the heart of leadership. As you do rise in leadership, responsibilities do increase and your rights decrease. Many representatives wouldn't give up certain things for the cause. Like many were scared to say yes because they were scared of what people would do to them. And that definitely does not show leadership, because if you believe, passionately about something and you want things to be right, then you'll make a sacrifice. Even, Lincoln gave his life for the cause ultimately. In order to change the nation, he had to make a lot of people unhappy. And in the end, everyone knows he ultimately gave his life. I think when you look at it from the film and just like in perspective now, definitely being president is a huge sacrifice. You have to give away your family and your free time is basically, non-existent. And you could tell in the film with his wife, always on him about not spending time with his sons or not spending time with her. And so you can just tell like the struggle between the two, because he has to give so much up for the nation and to, get through his cause. And for emotionally intelligent leadership, inspiration was one of the points, and this is motivating and moving others toward a shared vision. And I think when anyone talks about Lincoln, you automatically get the vision of inspiration. And like I said before, he inspired the people through his speeches and his stories. I mean, in the very beginning, the soldiers came up to him and were reciting his speech word for word. And I feel like even in our day, many of us couldn't do that. But I feel like because he was so inspirational, they, remembered the words he said and they actually had a meaning. They weren't just a random speech, that is given, every year. It was, a meaningful and inspirational speech. And because of that, people remembered it. And they saw how passionate he was and he was respected for it. Throughout the entire movie, people always talk about how they love him and how respected he is. And, I think definitely he was just an inspirational person, even with his, short speeches when he was raising the flag. He used that sense of humor to like gain respect from people, and in return that was inspirational for them. Another point is influence, and this includes like skills of persuasion. And again, Lincoln definitely used his sense of humor and stories to persuade. When he's talking to his board, they don't understand why he's pushing this amendment so hard when there's talks of peace, when there can be talks of peace and the war can end. And then he explains to them, the difference that the 13th Amendment will allow everyone to be free. And he just goes on and like all the technicalities of it. And in the end, they understand. He persuades them that it isn't that important. Some don't always agree with him, but in the end, you can tell it was a great accomplishment that he got the 13th Amendment through, and it really was a big deal in our nation's history. And then also the forms of power. I definitely think Lincoln used reward power when offering positions to gain votes. I know that he didn't want his name, put on that, but he had to be that change agent, and so he would offer positions to people that were vote on the fence and that would commit to voting yes. Just like the post office or the postmaster for the one, I forget his name, for the one representative that was going to say no. And then he also had legitimate power because he was the president. So obviously he is in a place of power, a position, so that gives him power over others. And then I think he also had referent power too, because like I said, over and over again, people told Lincoln how much the people love him and respect him. So he definitely had power just by having people respect him and the relationships he had with people. All right, so the last two are coaching and change agent. And coaching is helping others enhance their skills and also shows that the leader has a willingness to learn. I think Lincoln continuously worked with others and kept them on the right track to accomplish the goal. Even when he was getting votes, I feel like he was coaching the three gentlemen that were, trying to help get those votes, and also coaching the representatives. They would go back and forth about the differences for the amendment and why it was important. And I think like even then he was, sharing his knowledge and showing people why it was important. And he also definitely had high directive behavior, and you can see that through the entire film when he's trying to direct the nation into getting this amendment passed. And then the last one, change agent, is seeking out and working with others toward a new direction. Lincoln is the definition of a change agent. Like I said, he directly goes to the three gentlemen to help get final votes with the last 4 days, I believe, that were left. He took that initiative that he needed to become part of that mission to get the votes directly. So that was one definite example of him being a change agent. And another thing, the text says that effective change equals timing. And Lincoln knew that postponing the talks of peace would help the amendment. So he definitely understood that aspect of being a change agent. And then to make change happen, you must accept uncertainty. And I thought this was actually really weird at first in the movie, because I was like, why would Lincoln, go through all this if he wasn't for sure that it would pass? Because, he had a lot riding on this, and this would be the second time around it was going through. So I really didn't understand why he still went through with it, I guess. But then after reading this, it kind of like clicked. And to make change happen, you must accept uncertainty. And that's definitely true. And like I said, no one, including Lincoln, knew for sure they had the votes to pass the amendment. But I guess just when you're trying to implement change, you have to accept that. And, you have to just, push through and go through with all determination and your motivation and hope that it'll pass. And in the end, it worked out. And it was a great film. It was definitely a great film to relate to all of these laws and, the different characteristics for emotionally intelligent leadership. I think Lincoln was a great example for all of these, and I definitely enjoyed this movie and all these readings.